Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Dynamite Shirt Printing, Kyle Metz. What a guy. He came on as a sponsor, and my primary use for him is drop shipping. So what that means is that I don't got to buy inventory. I don't got to buy a bunch of t-shirts. Kyle handles it all. So it's ordered online, and then he prints it and ships it, and he handles everything. And it works out for both parties. If you're looking for something else like general screen printing, he handles that. He does embroidery. He does direct to garment, DTG, which means you can do one-offs, and there's no minimum on that. Kyle's been able to help a lot of businesses that I've been funneling to him just to get going and to, start up. I mean, you don't want to order 100 t-shirts when you're just coming out the gate. And Kyle can handle small orders, large orders. He can handle everything you need. That's Dynamite Shirt Printing, and it's dynamiteshirtprinting.com. Go check it out. My favorite skate shop in the Valley, 5anddimeeaston.com. You can shop online or in store. Their address is 140 Northampton Street, Easton, PA. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 11 to 7, Saturday, 10 to 7, and Sundays, 11 to 5. They carry clothing, shoes, boards, accessories, and more. You can get complete decks down there. They got grip. They got some local clothing down there as well. I know a couple guys that came on the show that they're now selling stuff in store, and they're exclusive to Fucked. They are doing so much for the independent skate community. They're doing so much for the DIY. They're doing a lot in the area with skateboarding, and I couldn't be prouder to have them as a sponsor. Their story is incredible, from starting it when they were 18 and then coming back later in life to opening up what the store is that they wanted. And the two guys down there are just incredible. I can't say enough good things about them. I love that they're a sponsor, and they really help out in the community. And if you skate or want to support them, please go check them out locally. It is 140 Northampton Street, Easton, PA. Online, it is 5anddimeeaston.com. Please go check them out. All Valley Rooter, Jared LaBarba, friend of the show, childhood friend, Never Again Studios official plumber. 24-hour emergency services. 610-762-1656. That's 610-762-1656. They charge by the job, not by the hour, and they are 100% fully insured. They have free estimates. They also do installation and repair. They have a list of things. I can't go over them all on here, but you can find them at allvalleyrouter.net. All of Jared's services are on there. It's a beautiful website. You can contact him through that website. You can find out how to do, emergency services. Where should I call? Who should I contact? You can get all that there at allvalleyrouter.net. Free estimates, fully insured. Jared LaBarba. Check him out. All right. Never Again Radio episode. I don't know anymore at this point. Welcome to Never Again Radio. How are you?
Good. How are you? Super hyped to be here.
I appreciate you coming on. I just recently got to watch you work. I've seen you in and out, and this is what happens. I was explaining to Josh from 10th Planet today when I told him you were coming on. I said a lot of the guys, people that come on from 10th Planet are people that I've crossed over and have seen at the school or during an event, but you're usually working or it's busy. And I think I started seeing you early on when Zach started bringing photographers in to kind of capture the events and finishers.
Yes.
And then, so I've crossed your path early on, and then with doing the show more, I just started being like, hey, I should grab somebody and sit them down. And sometimes it's awkward to have that conversation, but then when I saw you working at JM's wedding, I was like, there's no way I'm not reaching out. It was really impressive how much you were capturing it. And then when I actually saw how you captured the arm wrestling moment,
yes,
I was like, I really want to dig deep down into what you're doing. Where did you start with photography or art, or where does the desire to do and to capture an artistic form like that with photography, where did that start in your life?
Yeah, so probably like most people, I've always loved pictures just my entire life. In high school, shout out to Mr. Durso, I took photography in my high school course. And then my father also has always loved photography, and he actually did wedding photography. He had his own wedding photography business. He never took it to the level I did, but I worked alongside him for many years.
What did you do when you worked with him?
I was a second shooter, and I did some editing, so not a head photographer, a second shooter. And I loved it a lot, and did fairly well with it. So around the time he was looking to retire from his day job and from photography, I started having people approaching me directly to do their weddings.
How old were you when you were working with your dad?
I want to say, let's see, I started before I got married, so 25. So I've been doing it a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing it a while. And he gave me my blessing. He gave me his blessing. He's like, I've always envisioned, you doing this full time. It's a great job for someone who wants to have a family, because you can balance, your work life and your home life. And it's just grown. I used to have a day job myself. And when I lost my day job from the last recession, it kind of was like, right, Deanna, you could either go out and put your kid in daycare and work so you could pay for daycare, or you can, try to live the dream. And I had a very, very supportive husband who was like, we're going to make it work. We're going to make it work. Go do it. You have something there. And, almost 2 decades later,
It's got to be, that's got to feel good. I know what it's like to, I don't know how you are with like confidence and whatnot, but most people who are creating something or artistic and whatnot, they're usually insecure as like putting themselves out there. And then so to have the blessing from your dad and to learn from a professional, and you're looking up to somebody who's your father, and then getting to work with him side by side, and then having the support from your husband, that, it's almost like you can't say no, because you're being pushed in a direction that people believe in what you're doing.
I'm actually probably the opposite, which is one of the things that I think has suited me well to have my own business. Whenever I felt like I could do something, I've always been very, very
superior
confidence.
Yes.
Yeah. My entire life. I think when I was chatting with you over the phone, or maybe I was saying it to something else, I've been confident my whole life in things I shouldn't be confident in. There's videos of me when I was 8 years old, moonwalking like Michael Jackson, having no right to do this. But yeah, my confidence, it served me well. And photography is just one of those things, for better or for worse, I'm just good at it. And I've been able to relate that into a business that provides for my family. And it's also amazing doing something that gives people memories that they'll have to cherish for their, not only their life, but their kids' lives and their grandkids' lives.
When you were working early on with your dad, did you know right away that it was something that you wanted to do, and it was something that like you were getting good at? Because I'm sure like when you went back and like kind of got into looking at like the edits and all that, there's some times where you just know that like, I have a knack for this.
Yeah, I think more so my interactions with other people, you can learn the technical skills. My father taught me the technical skills, but I had an eye for it, and I've always been good with other people. So I've always been good. He would actually have me do the posing very quickly on how to pose people and make them feel comfortable. And then editing the pictures, that's really when I would say my skill level jumped, when I saw my raw images into my finished images. But probably, just being out there working with people and doing it, I was like, right, I'm good at this.
Well, it makes sense now from seeing at JM's wedding where you were like controlling things, and then like when people were out on the dance floor, you're like, cool, but like you weren't just out there to take pictures, like you were having a good time. So anybody that was on the floor did not feel like you were taking their picture. It felt like you were a part of what they were doing.
Yes.
And that's where I was like, that's so different, because I've seen people come out and they'll just stop, and like now you're getting, and everybody knows, when someone's taking your picture, it changes the moment if you know immediately that they're taking a picture of you. Yeah. So like then it was almost like you blend in with everybody, and then nobody's thinking about what you're doing. Exactly. Is that something that you developed early on and knew that you were kind of good at doing?
It's more just, I would say wedding photography and photography in general, but specifically wedding photography, it's a labor of love. It's a long day. You're actively working the whole time, but it's a labor of love. You have to do it, and you have to love doing it. And with my company, I'm not the only photographer. We have other head photographers that work, and I'm very, very specific with who I'll let represent the company. So you can't just be a good photographer with a nice personality. You have to have that same love for capturing that day. And
very similar to food. Making food.
Is it? Your food is amazing, by the way. If anybody who's listening hasn't had it, the smash burgers, like I'm drooling thinking about it. So like, yeah.
I like to relate a lot on here, but like that comment you made about like somebody has to love it. Like you can make food and you can just make it, and then someone will be like, "Hey, that's awesome." But then like I made food with my friend over the weekend for his wife's not the bachelorette party, but like the shower. I'm learning more about like the things like what women do in weddings and stuff. There's a lot, and it seems very stressful.
It's like a whole thing.
Yes, so like
it's a whole thing.
We made food for that, and then like he also knows how to put emotion into making food, and when you do that, it changes everything. So like you can make that smash burger, and people will ask me, well, how do you make it? But it's never going to taste the way I do, because like I care about like how much it's melting on one side, and you start obsessing with it, and then the way you make it is just full of obsession and love. And when you were saying that about like you have to find somebody who gives a shit about the photography as much as you do, it plays a massive role, because that's why I related when I saw you out there doing that. I'm like, oh, well, this is something where she's like putting herself 100% into this, and that's why the photography looks the way it does, is because she's putting herself into the work. And if you have you doing that, and then have somebody else who's just like flat and taking a picture, but they're not matching you're a heavy emotional person. Every picture you take, you can feel energy. So you're a giver. And if you had somebody who is a taker, it's not going to match to the style of what anybody would want. What's it like to try and find somebody? Because I know how hard it is. It's not hard, but you know meeting the person, because they're either going to give your energy or they're going to take your energy.
Yeah. So you scale up slowly, right? So it's not like my first year out by myself, I already had, 7 other head photographers. You scale up slowly. And I have, good people that work for me, and I find second shooters through all different means. For example, 10th Planet. I train at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu in Bethlehem, and I meet so many amazing people there. And there's a lot of people. Preet, I know you know Preet.
Yep.
He works with me sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, Preet works with me. You know Renee Sousa.
Yep.
Renee had
the
me.
Boys.
Yes. His mother works with me. She's an amazing photographer. So I'll meet second shooters through a variety of different means. And typically when I work with somebody as a second shooter, I know after working with them maybe an hour, I'll know right away, like, right, this is a person that's got it. And I'll pay attention to what they're doing, make sure that their work ethic is in line, their technical abilities are in line, and then I'll pay attention and pretty quickly ask them, like, is this something you'd be interested in? Would you be interested in training at how to be a head photographer? Because you can teach technical ability, you can teach timelines, but you can't teach heart, right? You can't teach heart. So somebody either has that in them or they don't have it in them. And I know right away if somebody has that in them. Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know. It's like when I cook with people, like I've taught a couple people how to cook, and you try and teach them on like how to put emotion into it, and you teach them, but it's kind of a crapshoot on whether or not they're going to be the style you're looking for. But but that also has to play in like making them feel comfortable, because some people will be uptight because they don't know how to express themselves. And then when you kind of mold somebody or like work with them a little bit, and I'm sure you get this a lot because it's how similar it is with me, where it's like if you are open and you give a lot of big energy, people feel comfortable about having energy around you.
Yeah.
And then people are always like, oh, it's so fun when you're always around. Well, it's like, well, I want that energy around me, so you create it around.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool thing, because it's wedding photography is fun, right? Like, it's fun. Like, we were just at a wedding together. I was there working and you were there as a guest, but it's fun, right? Like, it's a blast. People are there, they're having a party, they're celebrating the day two people promised each other to somebody. And it's one of those things that I find it so endearing and heartwarming and just hopeful for humanity. You know, we're in such a strange period in history, and just knowing that every single weekend people still throw huge parties purely because two people fell in love.
Yeah.
Like, how amazing is that at this point in society we still throw massive parties just because two people fell in love? Like, it's amazing.
It was fun, and you know, it's cool that you pointed that out, because you didn't realize it, you know, until like it's just like life, and then you get dressed, and then, you know, I'm like texting Luke, and I'm like, because he was at at my table, and you know, we're just like texting back and forth, and then when we got there, and you're dressed up, and you get out of the car, and you close the door, and I think that's the moment where it's like, oh, like this is a thing.
Yeah.
And like that, then it's like, and then that place was so, I've never been there, but that was such a beautiful setting, and out by the water. To me, the weather was perfect. All the girls were like, it's so cold. I'm like, finally, I'm not sweating. So like, to me, like, you know, the ceremony outside and then going inside in the barn venue, and it was like, you forgot about all the bullshit going on. And then it was cool because, like, you know, seeing the emotions between the bride and the groom, and like seeing people crying because they're happy, and then seeing the family, and, you know, dancing, and then, you know, JM's son on the bike the whole time. And it was like, you really forgot how messed up, or how much the perception of life is messed up as being, you know what I mean? Like,
oh no,
it's a beautiful escape. And like, sometimes
really
it's like, it looks like a burden, not a burden, but sometimes when people are doing stuff like that, it's like, oh, all right. But then when you get there, all that's gone. And like, as soon as we like got there, I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun. And then like, I saw Josh and his wife, and I'm like, oh, there's people here I know. And then it's like, you know, George and JM are doing shots over here, and they're like, yo. And then it's like, you know, and then you see you with such a big personality, and you're like, oh, she's doing the photography. And then like, it was a really cool, I haven't been to a wedding in a while, and it was nice to escape social media and everything else that was going on. And you know, that's a very valid point of like, people are still celebrating life and love and marriage, and like big, it's got to be cool for you to be a part of that. It
is so very cool, because doing wedding photography, you're with people on one of the most intimate days of their lives. So you truly get to know people. And one of maybe my favorite things about wedding photography, not even necessarily the weddings that I attend myself, but I edit every single picture that every single photographer takes from my studio. I hand edit, so I see everything. And just,
it's a lot of time.
It is a lot of time. It is a lot of time.
Editing's the part nobody sees.
Yeah, and I get to be a part of, you know, so many people's different families, so many different cultures, you know, people I might not necessarily run into in my day-to-day lives. You just get to know people so well. And I think one of the things that I love that's so interesting, that I think is lost if all you're doing is paying attention to the news or social media, is I don't care who you are, where your family's from, who you love, everybody is the same. They all fall in love the same. They're all excited the same.
Yeah.
They all feel that same stress the same. They all talk to their parents relatively the same.
What an awesome perspective, because you've been around so many people in that day.
Yeah.
And everything's the same for everybody.
It really is. And I feel like it's such a blessing. It's such a blessing to be able to be a part of that, because normally when you're walking around and you see somebody on the street, you're not going to see them interact intimately with their mom or their kid on the day they're going to promise themselves to somebody. So I get to see this beautiful little window into so many different people's lives, and we're all the same.
Yeah.
We really are. Yeah. We're all the same, and it's like amazing.
Yeah. What a really cool perspective on that. I never thought of it that way, because it's all the same stress, the same pressure. I mean, even when I was explaining not the Bachelorette, but what was I just talking about?
Just that we did ready.
With Brian and his wife, and like seeing all the girls doing their thing. And when I got there, like, everybody was just so excited. And then I was like, man, like, this is such a cliche thing where you're talking about, like, where you, like, when Brian's wife came up and hugged me for the bridal shower, like, you could tell it was something that she's been thinking about her entire life since she was a little girl.
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's what, leads up to these moments is like everybody thinks about that, and everybody thinks about getting married, and things might not go in the same direction for people, but to the core, everybody's excited to see their moment unfold.
Yeah, everybody, it's amazing. At the very heart of it, everybody is excited to have somebody to love and to have somebody love them for the rest of their lives. And that's like the heart of it, right? Like that's like everything. And it's universal, and it's awesome. It's awesome to be a part of it.
Yeah. When you first starting out with your father, at what point, there was obviously a point where you knew you were going to take this to your first step. Well, what was it like taking your first step to turning it into a business? Were you using a lot of like the things that he was doing? Because I know like this business is not what it was when you started, and it has grown, and your social media is solid, and like there's a lot that's very impressive about what you're doing. And I know because I've started from zero, and that push to get to where you're at is not easy to do at all. So like, what was your first step that you took to kind of separate yourself from being your father's assistant to being your actual business?
Yeah, so when I worked with him, I'm for anybody who's not watching, or I have a little bit of a baby face, maybe can't tell. I'm in my 40s. I'm in my mid 40s. So social media wasn't even really like a thing when I first started. So I played around with social media, and I started doing that. And then when my father slowed down, my father was very, very good, and he held nothing back from me. Anything he knew, he gave it to me graciously, because he only wanted to see me succeed. So then when it was time for me to say, right, so now I'm going to do this is the thing I'm going to do, I started off and I treated it like a business. I read everything that I could. I was constantly learning artistic things, business things. And I think one of the things that's helped me a lot is I don't ever want to look like a photographer who started wedding photography 20 years ago. I think that in my industry, there is a real risk of saying, I've done it, I've achieved it. I get wedding venues who recommend me, like, I know what I'm doing, I'm the guy, and you should come learn from me. And I think in most creative industries, if not all industries, it's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
It's constantly evolving. And if you're not humble enough to say, just because I know what I know now doesn't mean that I can't learn something. So here's a great example. I have second shooters, and I have a girl who started with me this season who's phenomenal. She's going to be a head photographer for us. She's very, very good. And I was working with her, and she offered up an idea, and she's like, I don't know, like, because she was working with me, and sometimes people feel weird about working with the boss, and she's like, I don't know, am I overstepping? And I'm like, please, I tell this to everybody, by all means, if you see something that's amazing, tell me.
Yeah.
I don't know everything. And even if I know everything right now, tomorrow there's something new that I'm not going to know. And you have to have that humility to know that you don't know it all.
Yeah,
because you could
it's
learn
a hard
from
lesson to
everywhere.
learn too. It's early on when I was doing this, it was like, I didn't understand that people were teaching me how to do all this, because the people that were mentoring or like I was working under were making me learn this. They weren't giving it to me. They were making me learn how to do it. And it was confusing and raw. And there was so many pressure because I'm like hosting and I'm doing all this. But like now it's to the point where like I can control a lot of this, and I can adjust the audio to get us through it, and I can make sure it's recording and all that stuff. But it's like that came from me learning it all. And then now even to this day is like I'll ask these guys like, hey, would this be good, would this be good? And then now I'm like having the confidence to put on like venue stuff that like I'm actually I guess it's considered the producer, but like when I'm running everything behind the scenes, I'm like, man, I remember when I used to go get these guys coffee.
Right.
And then now it's like, because I'm being open enough to be like, hey, do you see my creative perspective? And they're saying yes. It's not that I'm the one who's producing it, I'm just now working with them instead of working against. Or so it's like that's so important to have people suggest things. And like people give me suggestions on stuff all the time, and some of it isn't anything I can work with, but yeah, there are times when people are like, hey, you should try doing this. Or like what I always put myself out there to be like, hey, did you ever try this? And like I don't care if someone's like, hey, like that's not even remotely going to help the situation, but at least you're being creative, and like, you know, you have to be open to the idea of change, or this wouldn't be the way it is. Like I told you, like when you came down here, and I tell everybody, and it's like, I worked with an interior designer on this who is one of my best friends, and it's like, I could just be like, hey, yeah, thanks, but it's like, she changed how I perceive things because I was open to her creative view. And when you learn that, like, it's totally fine to look at somebody else, like, you would want to look through the lens of hers figuratively on how she wants to create, because then that way you can create together.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's hard sometimes to, and some people are definitely don't work the way we're talking and are a nightmare to work with. But like when you have somebody open to ideas, and especially like I like that you pointed out about social media. Like when I was coming up, there wasn't Instagram.
Right. Yeah. Instagram I had to learn it.
Yeah. And then when Instagram was first out, I was trying to put videos on it, and they were only letting you put like, because I remember when they first were doing like 15-second videos.
Oh, yeah.
And like Vine was popular. Like, it's not the way it is now, where you can literally start a business and completely put it out there and start getting work. Like back in the day, it was, you know, I was doing stuff off of Facebook. It was before Facebook was ruined.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things where it's very, very interesting. I think that, so I had mentioned to you, very strangely, I've just always been a confident person. I really have. But I think when you have confidence, you're more open to people's suggestions, because you're not going to see input as an insult against you. Because I have confidence in my work. I have confidence in my craft. I have confidence in what I put out there. So when somebody offers it up to me, I don't have this feeling like they're telling me what to do because they think I'm bad. I'm confident in what I do, and I think they're telling me a great idea that's just something I can add to my business. And it's one of those things where it's free. It's free to listen to people. You don't have to take everybody's suggestion, but just going into that with that openness and seeing it as a potentially positive thing rather than as somebody putting a dig at on you, it makes all the difference.
What was it like to kind of get the business off the ground and like to a point where you could walk away from your job? Because I always try and stress on this because it was the hardest thing that I had to do. And somebody told me it was some of the best advice I ever gotten. And I was bartending in Virginia when I moved there, and a friend of mine had ran a very successful, he was the guy who got Tommy Hilfiger into like Boscov's and all that. So he like got it in department stores. So like looking back on it, I'm like, I wish I would have asked way more questions.
Right.
Like, but like, you know, he told me, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And in 6 months, he's like, you're never going to be ready. You're never going to be ready for the moment to take it on fully. You're never going to be ready to the time that you keep saying you need to be working it full time already.
Right.
So what was that like for you, you know, to start out slow and kind of start building up, and you have the craft and stuff from your learning with your father, and you're kind of like getting to a point where social media is helping you a little bit, but like when was the actual jump to be like, I'm full time?
Yeah, so the jump for me was when I got laid off.
Yeah,
so
that'll help.
I had a day job, because like most people who have a small business, you don't just go from having 0 clients to quitting your job. You know, you work up slow. So I had a day job. It was in the pharmaceutical industry.
Did you like that?
I just ran a I ran an office.
Yeah.
I ran an office. It was a very small office. I loved the people that I worked with, but it was like an office job, right? I worked with great people. And then when my whole department got laid off, my job went the way of the economy, the last recession, I was given a severance package. I had the option to not take the package and commute up. I'm from New Jersey. I had the option to commute up to White Plains, New York, which would have been an 1.5-hour commute at least one way. And I had a very young child at the time. So kind of sat down with my husband and we did the math to see what that commute would look like, the time that it would take me away from my daughter. And we just both agreed that it would be better for our family to take the severance package and put everything I could into the business and treat it like a business, actually treat it like a business. And my husband, I have an amazing husband. He worked really, really hard. He took every single overtime shift, everything he could to supplement my income. But I kind of viewed it whereas I have the confidence, not that I felt like the push because, oh, I don't know if I can do this, but people are pushing me into it. I more felt like I've been given such an amazing opportunity. I've been given the option to where I don't even have to wonder, should I quit my job, right? I didn't have to wonder. I got laid off. I didn't have to wonder, should I go out there and look for the knowledge? The knowledge was given to me. I don't have to wonder, do I have a partner who's going to support me? Because he already did. So to me, it felt like, I know that you could see being laid off of your job as like the worst thing in the entire world because it's a steady paycheck. But I looked at it more like, this is such a blessing because I don't have to wonder, should I do it? This is what's been thrown into my lap, and I have it all. So right now I'm not going to squander these blessings. I'm going to take them and make it work.
I remember when I took the leap with this, it was like a conversation I had with my parents, and we talked about how early on it's like they think you're crazy, but then like after a while, my mom and dad were like, like he's not gonna stop doing this. We have to just naturally they became supportive because you start going home and you're like, hey, I got I'm sure with your early gigs, it's like, yeah, I booked the wedding.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So it's like I was in a position where like I had tried so many times, and I was literally miserable when I wasn't able to do this thing that I created. And I remember my mom was like, just do it. You're never going to know if this is what you're supposed to be doing and if you're truly going to be happy or if this will work until you walk over and do it. And then they were like, we will support you 100%.
That's awesome.
They're like for like, you got a month and a half. They're like, if you run into trouble, let us know. Right. And I didn't have to let them know because I had built such a strong foundation behind it where, like I'm sure when you got to the point where you had to walk into this now, but the work was done already. You already busted your ass with your dad. Right. You already busted your ass with the business up to here. So like when you get to that moment, and it's weird because it's like everyone's like, you just know. And it's like for me, it was like I had quit a job because I was treated very poorly and I was in a very terrible part of my life. And like, I just decided to do it. But when I decided to do it and said I'm going to do it, and it was no longer this weird, because a lot of people get stuck in a gray area. Right. And when you go over, and I'm sure it was the same feeling with you when you woke up the next day and you're like, okay, I'm running this business now. You just know.
Yeah, it was awesome. And this wasn't the first business that I had. I had 2 failed businesses.
What were the other ones?
So I love baking, and I used to do it a lot. So I had Cakes by Wheezy. Wheezy is my childhood nickname from my mom. Hi, Mom. So I had Cakes by Wheezy, and I sold cakes, and I was doing it. I was selling cakes, but I just looked at the time and the effort and what the materials cost, and I just determined like this isn't viable. This isn't a good way to make money. And then, so I had mentioned that I ran an office. I was a secretary. Right now they're called administrative assistants, but I don't care. I was a secretary. So I knew that there were a lot of small businesses out there. So I tried having an administrative consulting business, right? Because these small businesses don't have people who do their books and stuff. So I put it out there. It was called Turnkey Design and Print, and I would do all that for you. And I put it out there, and that failed. So then I tried photography, right? And you would hear like snickers from people, maybe not even knowing that it would like make you feel dumb or make you feel down. But it's like, oh geez, now she's doing photography. How many more things is she gonna do? But it's like, What does it matter? You wouldn't fault somebody if they were working for somebody else and then look to move into another company that was a better fit for them. So it's like, why would you put me down that I tried to do a small business? I had the wherewithal to determine, right, this isn't a good fit, and now I'm going to try to do something else. And I think it just goes back, you have to have a thick skin or a confidence if you're going to run your own business, because there are naysayers, because going out there and going against the grain and working for yourself, not taking that traditional route of breaking your back day in and day out to make somebody else rich, you're doing something that other people don't do. And for whatever reason, people like to make you feel bad for that sometimes. So you just have to be like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not faulting you for doing something I wouldn't do. don't fault me for doing something I want to do. And it ended up working out really, really well. But it wasn't my first chance. There were other failures at businesses that didn't work out.
Yeah, there's two things I want to touch on that. One with, like, I like that you brought up that you failed other jobs, because I tell people all the time, like, this whole thing and where I'm at now is because I failed every single time I tried to do it. Like, this started out as a clothing company and then went into this, which then grew. But it's like, the clothing, it's like I still won't give up on it because I started with it. And then it went into food, and it's like I learned so many mistakes from the clothing because I did it for so long and I tried so hard with it, and I went to conventions and I sat there and nobody bought anything, and those rides home when you spent money and you're just like, man, like, you want to give up on it, but you see the vision and you don't. And then sometimes when you're talking to people and they just kind of like shit on it, where they're like, yeah, maybe you should go back to a regular job, or like, yeah, man, like, maybe, or they just keep kind of looking at it as like, oh, your hobby,
Yeah.
or like, like, kind of trashing you for it. It's like, one, it's like, I learned everything I could tell somebody how to do a podcast and what equipment to buy, and it's because I failed at podcasting so many times. And the early days, it's like not understanding how to hook any of this equipment up and all the bullshit that goes into it, and then like buying fucking 800 t-shirts and then selling 20, and then having t-shirts for forever in the back. I still have t-shirts from when I very first started that I'm keeping for nostalgia at this point, but like there's stuff in the back that I still have from when I started this whole business and I didn't understand what I was doing. And I thought when I created a line that I would just buy 100 of every t-shirt I'm making and I would put them on a shelf and they were naturally going to sell themselves because people were liking a Facebook post.
Right.
And then when reality hits in, it's like it's not a good place to be, and you got to have thick skin, and you got to want to get out of it, and you got to want to keep believing every day when you wake up that one moment that you believed in your head it's good enough to keep going. And then when people shit on that, like, it's not really ever talked about, but it's like, man, like, that'll fuck with you. Like,
Yeah.
there's plenty of times when I came home and my parents or like best friends were like telling me to give up on it. Like, now when I listen to people and they tell me, like, a friend of mine was like, yo, let that go, not
Right.
give up on it, let it go.
Right.
Like, make your money on the burgers and like make your money on these things that you know how to make money on, and like come back to that later when like there might be something that's more beneficial to bring it on. And now as like a grown adult in a business, and I've been running, I'm 42, I've been started when I'm 28, I could take that because somebody who also has done this I can have a conversation with you, like you, and not insult you. But some people who don't have the knowledge of what it took to get here, they're still working a 9 to 5. And then when
Right.
I started getting past them, then you start hearing different comments where they're like, oh, that's cool that you're doing that. And then now
Right.
it swings and it's like, oh, well, I really like that you're doing that.
Right,
Dude, that's
right.
dope that you're doing that. Or they'll be like, oh, you don't even do anything all day. And it's like, man, like, I got freedom. That's what I got out of this. It wasn't money I was after, which I didn't know what my chase was. Everybody's got a chase. Some people chase money. Some people chase fame. I didn't know what would make me happy. And when I had the freedom to get up, go to the gym, come back here, talk to the guy upstairs to plan on some stuff, set the studio up, have an interview with you, and then go to dinner with my mom, and then that's my day. Like, that's what I wanted to do. So it's like I was going after freedom the whole time. And then people are
Right.
telling me, hey man, you don't need to be doing that while you're locked into a 9 to 5 and you got to work for the next 15 years to get half your paycheck.
Right.
And think that that's riding off into the sunset. And it's like, everybody's sunset's different. And I would never shit on people
Right.
in that manner. It's tough because, like I said, nobody talks about it because it's an uncomfortable insult that you kind of just take with you and walk away from.
Yeah, it's a very, very strange thing. People, for many people, not all people, but people are so scared of
Yeah.
someone else calling them stupid or someone else thinking they're foolish. Like, so for example, jiu-jitsu, you talked about 10th Planet. I train at 10th Planet Bethlehem jiu-jitsu. And I started training jiu-jitsu when I was 39 years old. Here I am, this mom of 3 kids, training. I started at another gym and then I went to 10th Planet. I celebrated my 40th birthday with 10th Planet. And, you first start doing it and people look at you have 3 heads. Like, what's wrong with you? You're a woman in your 40s wrestling around with 20-year-old guys twice your size. And then I started competing, people rolling their eyes, friends, you run into friends from high school, be like, I can't believe you're doing that. That's so dumb. And then, then you compete and then you win and then you go out and you get a belt promotion and people are like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. And I think it's just their insecurities.
Yeah.
Their insecurities and they're putting it out there on you. And I'm a big thing. Live your best life.
Yeah.
Just go out there and live your best life. Like, what do I have to be afraid of? Yeah, I'm gonna go train jujitsu with a bunch of 20-year-olds twice my size, and maybe they'll submit me, maybe they won't. But I'm doing something amazing that I love for myself, and I'm gonna go out there and start a business. A business in a super saturated market. But I'm doing it, and I'm not gonna let fear of other people making fun of me stop me from living my best life.
Yeah, and it's an interesting topic to stay on because I don't stay on it much, or I don't get into this conversation much, but it's almost like where people were afraid to take their risk on what they really wanted to do. And then there's a lot of pre-programmed stuff, especially from the era that we grew up in, where it was like, hey, if you don't go to college, you're a loser and you're going to work in a factory. And then you just picture like those black and white movies where like, you know what I mean? But
no,
like,
I totally
that's how the 80s was.
Yes.
It's not how it is now. So like you have a lot of people who like, they're like, hey man, like, I don't know if you should have done that. And it, like, what's crazy is like, it's been so scary and uncomfortable for me to be on this road because I don't have anybody to relate to.
Right.
Like until I started meeting like Zach and JM and other people who are running businesses and my friend Carlos, and like you start having people tell you it's okay to live your life the way you want.
Right.
And there's so many people pre-programmed to like get a job, pay for your insurance, do this, do that, do this, do that. And then it's like when it all settles down, it's a rat race and you're still, working for the next paycheck. Like I know people who have a ton of money and they're still living paycheck to paycheck because everything's taken from them in these built-in systems that needed to be. So then it's like when I got into like actually doing this, and like you could also do what I'm doing and totally eat a plate of shit. You have to work as hard as you can every day. Every day I don't want to work and I tell myself I'm not working hard enough. I'm still outworking most people who are at a regular job, which is why I'm able to keep it up to where I am. But with my next moves and what I'm going to do, and if everything goes in the way, even if it goes a little bit in the way that I am, I'm caught up. And now I'm opening a restaurant. I'm building a TV studio. I have all this successful things that are behind me, and I know how to make money off of all of them. And now I'm at a point where I'm caught up. And now I'm caught up, but I'm not stuck. And there's a big difference between being stuck at a job you hate and having to wait for retirement and being miserable than being at a point where I'm okay with whatever money's coming in because I get to make food. I get to help people on a daily basis. I get to put out video and audio. I get to work with amazing people like you. And, and then the avenues of creativity that come down there. We're like, hey, we should do this with photography. Or like, hey, we're going to get into food soon. You should come down and work at the studio. And now I have a place where there's other people who are like-minded like me who can work together in a space. And if I wouldn't have taken the risk to get half of what I think's coming down the road, I'd be working in a fucking factory.
Yeah.
And that's what I keep looking at, where I'm like, how dare you have ever said anything to me, because at least I had the balls to get into a lane. And most people stay in a lane where it's backed up and they're in line, and hey, in 10 years, it was like the post office. Hey, if you stick around for 15 years, you might get full insurance and then we'll pay you a couple extra bucks. And I'm like, for the next 15 years, you're telling me I can't figure out how I want to live my life?
Yeah, it's almost like, the king's new clothes. For anybody who's listening, if you don't know the fable, it's the king. It's an old kid story. The king has these people come by and design him new clothes, and the joke of it is, it's nothing, right? They just build it up and everybody's believed that these are the most beautiful clothes in the world. So the king is walking around naked, but everybody's too embarrassed to say they can't see the clothes because it says only the truly good people can see these clothes. So nobody will admit that the king is naked, and everybody walks around complimenting his clothes, until finally a kid walks up and is like, bro, the king is naked. And then finally one person, all it took was one person to break through, And then everybody's like, yeah, you're right. And that's almost what it's like with going your own way. People are so afraid to step out of that mold because they're told over and over and over again, this is what you do, this is what you do. And they don't want to look foolish. And it just takes one person to break that mold and be like, you're not foolish and you can do this. And it just attracts all that amazing positivity, and you just start surrounding yourself with people who's doing it as well, and you realize like it's your own mind. You've been trapping, your mind has been trapping your mind to make you think you can't do it. And once you break free from your own trappings, you realize like it's yours. The world is yours.
It's crazy.
Just go take it.
It's crazy. I mean, I've had some moments even recently where it's like, you know, like the stuff comes up on Instagram with like Gary Vee and all that stuff, but a lot of what all of those people are saying are true. Like it's basic formality, but they're also giving you life lessons that they learned, and they're broken down to hit a broad audience, because everyone's always like, oh, they just say these things, and I'm like, well, they're relating to a million people, so you can't, you have to have a broad stroke on that. So then when I started hitting these goals, and it was the same thing like when I got sober. I was sober for 10 years and then walked away from it, but in that 10 years you just start naturally doing the steps, and then you're like, oh well, that's where the steps came from.
Right.
Like I didn't go and do steps and have a sponsor. Like I just did what I felt natural. Like the first thing I did was like apologize to my entire family. And then like once I started going down these steps, it's like, holy shit. Cause then somebody was like, oh, well, you're on step 7. And I'm like, what?
What are you talking about?
and then like I started going with my buddy Zola, and we started going to meetings together, and like I started learning like that. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, cause I'm always the person like engineering runs deep in our family. And I feel like I was never able to like put my hands on engineering and understand it, but I'm always obsessed with the beginning of something. And I feel like, so like I always look down the road. So I'm like, all right, well, this was obviously started from somebody who's going through what I'm going through. So now when I apply that same thought, which is why I tell everybody, like, not everybody, but like what I hold to me is like those 10 years changed my life. I grew up, I became a man. Like I was being a total fucking idiot, and like I had to get control of my life and like settle some things with my parents that I wanted them to see this path of like me becoming an adult. And like, so like I'll never, that part of my life is always something I hold near and dear. And now I take that and I learn what I take from that, and I learn things from this new version of my life that I'm on now, and it's a different path. And it's like I apply that to business now. So when I hear people talk like that, I'm like, well, what's he really talking about? And then it's like, it's exactly what you just explained. And you know, I'm going through this thing now where like I can't act anymore on what I'm doing. I now have to actually be this version of myself. And now I see myself slowly stepping in like, yo man, you can't say you're Mike from Never Again doing all this shit anymore and hide in this basement. Like you have to step out and play that role that you've created for you to put on. And when I do that, and the more I do that, I'm like, oh, this is like what I'm afraid to be, which is what this whole business is built off of, is like who you are. And it's like I'm trying to define myself by interviewing people and hearing their stories, but like this business in my life isn't going to be as successful until I take that role of what I'm trying to do. And when you do that, and it's weird and uncomfortable and kind of gets third person sometimes, that's when it starts to flourish. And like there's like so many different variables to like where you're at mentally in running a business. And like I think a lot of people don't understand any of that because they're not doing it on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's just you just have to do it. You just have to go out there, be unapologetically you. And you mentioned something that's so interesting to me, that I'm actually not 100% familiar with who you mentioned on Instagram, but it seemed like they basically are motivational. They're putting
motivational speakers,
putting out motivation. And I noticed this myself, and I know just even in my own mind, my first instinct when I hear somebody saying motivational is to be like, who's this jerk?
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting...
a snake oil salesman.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you're almost like pre-programmed to see somebody who's trying to help raise you up and lift you out.
Yeah.
And your first instinct is, you're an idiot, I have to go back to the rat race. And it doesn't make sense. Like it wonders you, like where is this programming coming from that so many of us instinctually just feel like we can't escape it, and we just need to be held down. When you have people so excited to help you. One of the things that I've noticed is if you just let people talk, people want to help you. Like, it's there. You just have to take it.
And a lot of people I feel like aren't open for the help, or like they're kind of like narrow-minded. I mean, well, there's also stages of where people are at in business, and like I've just been like fighting in it for so long and like trying to get to my goals, and I am close, but my whole life's going to change, and then it's going to be, you know, I got to start all over again. But it's like now I kind of can talk to somebody, engage like where they're at. Like, so it's like, all right, well, I can't really have this type of conversation with you because you're kind of like just starting out and I can't overload this. So it's like, there's so many different levels. And like, I didn't understand like when people say like, oh, well, you run your own business, like what it actually entails. And everyone's like, oh, well, it's twice the work. It's almost, it's almost quadruple the amount of work, because the mental of it, which I don't think a lot of people talk about. I mean, I do when I bring different people down here, and like, you know, I love having like different people back on, and like one of the sponsors of the show, and he's been on a bunch of Rips Auto Detail, and like when he comes on, you know, he's always growing, and he's now moved to like a brand new facility, and like I can't wait to talk with him because like he started that from nothing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
He started from nothing, and now he's like in a facility and like doing what he really wanted to do, and it's like it's so hard mentally to keep going, and it's like it's a daily thing that you have to wake up, and nobody talks about that battle the moment you get out of bed, is to like, I gotta work, I gotta focus, and it's like there's no pre-planned thing because it's your thing that you have to keep growing.
Right, yeah, it's a very interesting thing. It's like that funny meme that you've seen, entrepreneurs, people who own their own business, are the only people who are willing to work an 80-hour work week, so they don't work 40 hours a week.
It's the truth.
But one of the things, and it's always, for better or for worse, my entire life, it used to drive my parents crazy because, you know, parents want to protect their children and put you know, restrictions in place. I've always thought, if somebody else can do it, why can't I? And I can't ever not think that way. And when I left my day job, so I worked for Hitachi. Hitachi owns many, many different companies. I was in a very, very small department. And when you start at Hitachi, they teach you the history of the company. So when I left the company, it was one of those things. It was started, you know, by Hitachi-san, you know, in Japan, right? Like, he was a real person that just started something, and now it's huge. And it's one of those things, like, if Joey Macaroni could, in a couple of generations, own this huge, amazing business, why can't I? Why can't, you know, my father started something small that I took and I grew bigger, and I have children, and my children are interested, and they're interested in the business. So why can't that be me? Why can't in 2 generations my children, my grandchildren have this like amazing thing? Like, if somebody else can do it, why can't I?
It's a really good moment to have. Mine was with I'm a huge Action Bronson fan, and you know, I remember, and I'll never forget it, and I tell the story often. I was working at the Newburgh Deli. I was in the kitchen. I was working with 2 other people. We were miserable. It was probably like busy, and you know, we would listen to Action Bronson. You know, you cook, so it's like you find out who Anthony Bourdain is.
Right.
You get into Action Bronson. There's always music playing. Music is a huge part of my life. So like, you know, when I started watching, you know, Action Bronson start doing Fuck That's Delicious, I'm like, man, you know, because I was podcasting at the time, and podcasting was the thing I used to have to explain to people, like, yo, hey, it's like an interview, or like people didn't understand, like, what do you mean you podcast? So like, you know, I was already doing like an art form and trying to capture it, and then he started doing Fuck That's Delicious, and I remember saying to my buddy, I'm like, yo, dude, I'm like, why does he get to do that? How can he do everything he loves and go from doing you know, to doing Fuck That's Delicious, then to doing hip hop, then to making his own paintings, then to selling olive oil, then, you know, and then we went and saw him live, and then you see him take all these things and put it together, and then now he's at a venue making money off of it, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to take everything that I love to do, and I want to wrap it all up in one thing, and any way I turn in to get away from stress of one thing, it's another thing I love, so it's like getting hugs. This sucks. Cool. I'm hugging you over here. This sucks. All right, cool. There's a hug back here. So it's like, like when I developed that, it's awesome now, because it's like, this is what I say to people where they're like, yo, you're opening a restaurant? And I'm like, Action Bronson shit, man. They're like, I'm like, yo, I'm doing a cooking show, and like I'm gonna do all this stuff, and you know, we can do pop-ups out of there, and it's Action Bronson shit. And like, that's my favorite way of describing it, because it's like I'm building a life for me where I can go anywhere that I love to do it, because anywhere you go in life is stress and worry and death, and it's like you can't escape things. I can't escape my friends that have died when I was building this business. I can't escape my parents' health and all this stuff. So that in between, why wouldn't you want that to be things that you love to make the blows of real life easier? Why wouldn't you want to be doing something that you love, so when you get a phone call, it doesn't suck as much as it would because I gotta drive into work and ask them if it's okay to have a day off because my best friend's dead. Like, I'd rather build this like really awesome lifestyle and do exactly what I love to do, so then like the joys of life are even more joyful, because I can go do whatever the fuck I want and go see all my nieces and go to dinner and go to their birthdays, and I don't because I'm working too much, but like I can if I want to, and I can do all these things. So it's like just building something you love. I never understood at this point in my life, and I'm sure it's the same with you, the idea of ever doing anything than what you're doing now doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine going back. And I feel like society is just set up to tell you you're stuck in this cage.
Yeah.
So I'm in New Jersey, and I have an event-based, wedding photography. That's mostly what we do. So it's a business that relies on large quantities of people getting together very personally. So for better or for worse, however you feel about the shutdowns, I was shut down for a year. So it gave me a lot of time to read and look into things. And Zach Mislaney of 10th Planet Bethlehem, he actually recommended a couple books to me. It's funny, like sometimes you think about a jiu-jitsu guy as just maybe being like a jock or a martial artist, and you don't realize how wildly intelligent and insightful
He's a beast.
These people are.
He's a beast.
Yes, and he had recommended a book to me that really, broke things down from a history standpoint, and you see how it benefits corporations for you to feel like you're stuck inside this cage. And having that time off to read and to research and to look into things, it gave me the confidence. My oldest daughter, I think I had mentioned it to you, my oldest daughter is going another path. She's not going to, a traditional high school. She's attending a polytech for the arts. And that's something, we're from the same generation, where when growing up for me,
wasn't available. Well, and if it was wildly expensive.
Well, no, like Votech.
Yeah.
Votech,
but Votech was like, it was shit on.
Polytech is the same thing as Votech. They just don't call it Votech anymore. They call it Polytech. I guess it's a rebranding. But like I was actually like afraid to tell my parents I'm going to let my oldest daughter attend Votech because of like a stigmatization.
But that was the same thing with college and whatnot. If you weren't going to college, you were a Votecher. If you were going to Votecher, you were with the kids who wanted to work on cars, and those kids were lesser people. And then when you look at it, all those people had fundamentals to start careers, and then everyone else got debt.
Yeah.
And then they didn't get to do what they wanted. Meanwhile, at least the people over here could open a mechanic shop or be a plumber or make ridiculous money.
Yeah. So just kind of reading into that, and I knew what I experienced personally. I went through college. I had, amazing parents who paid for me to go to college, so I didn't have that same debt that so many people are burdened with. And while I wouldn't say college is useless, I don't necessarily use my college degrees. But having the time to see the history, I know how I felt trying to go against the grain, and I know the instinctual feelings about that. Sorry about that.
You're good.
But then actually reading the history and taking that time and seeing why so many people feel trapped, it kind of gave me the confidence to be like, right, I'm going to let my daughter pursue her own way, and I'm going to let her attend a Votech to actually gain real world knowledge. And that probably was the biggest challenge. I know in my own life that I was able to take that step and go my own way and do something non-traditional. But when you have kids, you have this overwhelming instinct to protect your children, and that probably was the hardest jump. Not having a normal day job for myself, but saying, I'm going to let my daughter do that. I'm going to support my daughter in attending a VOTEC and learn a trade and a craft and take a non-traditional route. And it was terrifying. And sometimes you feel like people are going to look down on you, like, oh, your kid doesn't go to high school. Your kid's not looking at a 4-year school. But just seeing how what I've learned in my own life and allowing my child to do the same thing, it was terrifying, but it's been the absolute most amazing thing for her. And again, it's so interesting because you gain these insights from places you would never expect it. You would never expect to get life advice for raising a child from a guy who owns a martial arts school, right? But if you just have that humility to know you're not the smartest guy in the room, and knowledge comes from everywhere. And if somebody recommends a book to you, read the book, and just having that humility to be open to different ideas has made all the difference.
Yeah. I feel like it builds structure. And when I started talking to Zach a lot about business, it was like the same thing with like recommending books, and we would bounce stuff off of each other. And then it really builds a foundation into like kind of opening your mind to just working better and working in different fashions. I want to get to the point now where we're kind of caught up because, like you've developed the business, you took the jump on it, you obviously have pushed this business to a point where you have employees. Like, where are you at with the business right now? Because it's come a very long way. I mean, I like peeling back the layers of everything and starting it from when you were with your dad and then kind of grew it. And then, you got through the pandemic and the shutdown and, now things go back into full swing. So what was that like to come out of the full swing of the pandemic, and like where are you kind of at with everything right now?
Yeah, so for tax purposes, I know they hired new IRS agents. I don't have any employees. I only hire contractors who have their own business, so they're officially contractors. So if anybody's listening, contractors only. So I had my own business, and I was the only head photographer for a very, very long time. And because I do all my own editing, I was working 7 days a week, and it felt like I was working 10 days a week. And there would be times during the height of the wedding season where I would call up my husband and be like, I can't do it anymore. Like, I can't, the money's not worth it. I can't just be working constantly. My children couldn't be in sports, right? They couldn't be in sports because I was working all week long and working all weekend on site. So I got to a point where I had to feel comfortable giving up a little bit control. I had very, very good people.
That's hard too.
That was the hardest.
I'm going through
thing.
It now.
It was the hardest thing I had to do, was to give up control and allow.
And it's the only way it grows.
It was the only way. So once I said, okay, right, you have everything. You can do a head photographer. I don't have to be on site. It was terrifying, but it wildly changed the trajectory of my business. Once I saw that, and it went really, really well, and I understood how to look for people, how to train people, my business just grew exponentially because I know I was able to scale it up. I was able to find the right people. So I feel very, very strongly that your business is only as good as the people who work for you. So I try very hard to take very, very good care of my contractors. My contractors are treated well. I respect them immensely. They're paid very well. They because I feel like they are Cherryville photography when they're on site. So I actually didn't, I know a lot of people talk about how hard it was to come back from the pandemic. I didn't experience that at all. I grew after
same,
the
and I think, and I'll let you continue, but I think that the same reason is because you said it earlier, is if you took the time during that shutdown to stop your business, fix it, and grow it, and learn. When the business kept going, and it was like, oh, cool, like you guys are catching up. Like I never stopped.
Yeah.
And like, so I understand with that, where like when you were developing the business am working on it more. If you paid attention to the whole world stopping, there was shit you wouldn't ever been able to fix in your business because of the rat race. That when that rat race stopped, it's like, oh, cool, I'm going to move these things around. And it was, it wasn't a lot you could do, but you could move it around and then just, hey, I'm picking right back up. And then when you found your pockets of work, when work started coming back, you were just right back in the swing of things and everything was just adjusted already.
Yeah, and I have a great respect for my clients. I'm no fool. You could pick up a rock and throw it and you'll hit somebody on the head who says there's a wedding photographer. So while I'm blessed, we are incredibly successful. We're about as successful as a wedding photography business as you could possibly be without being one of these factories who just pump out weddings without caring about it. But I truly, truly respect my clients, and I never made it hard for them to stay with us through all the rescheduling. I never charged up fees. I never asked for more deposits. So not only really caring a lot about the people who work for me, I truly care about our clients, and I think they see that. So we have amazing reviews. We have amazing people who work for us. Venues. We have not like a handful, like multiple handfuls of venues that refer us out there. So we're only growing. We're growing and we're getting bigger and bigger, and the business is set up in such a way that it can continue to grow. And I would love for it, my oldest daughter who's in art school now, she's getting a bigger hand on it. And I would just love for it to be, we have Cherryville HQ, Cherryville East, and then, maybe expand it as my husband moves into the next phase of his life. And if we buy a second home in another state, having Cherryville West, because I know the business. I know it so well, and I know we can duplicate this in other places. And it makes me feel very, very excited to know all of these amazing memories that we're giving to so many people here in New Jersey and Eastern PA that, potentially we can give the same thing to other people in other parts of the country. And it's exciting. It's exciting to get your business down to almost a science. I don't think people realize that aren't in creative industries that while it's creative, it's also formulaic. Like you were talking to me a little bit before we started, and you didn't describe it as formulaic, but like in my head, like I always think like that, like it's formulaic. Like you have things that you do that are going to produce amazing results, and once you have that set, it's exciting. It's exciting to see how you can use that and scale up and grow and give more things to more people.
It's one of the things that just developed from literally doing interviews like this nonstop, and then you get better at interviewing, you get more confident in doing stuff, and then you almost get bored in your work because it's not mastering it, but like, sometimes I'm like, man, all I do is interview people, and then like I'm away from this big creative side of me. So like when you were coming down, I was explaining studio sets, and like what's cool now is like being able to push off this table and going over here now and like hosting a music thing and then being like, all right, well, if I was a viewer and I wasn't really into podcasts, but I really want to support Mike and what he's doing, like, and I went to his YouTube channel, well, what's there? It's just podcasts. But if I can create this music thing and somebody can tune in and they can watch, and somebody who likes that girl who's performing, and then they're like, oh, well, what's Mike have? I didn't know he was podcasting. Now it's like you can just paint such a broader picture. And then it was like when you said formulaic, like it is that way, and I don't realize it because I'm an obsessively creative person who needs to create in order to be happy. And when you get lost in that, you don't realize that you're just doing it. But then when you kind of stick your head up like a gopher or a groundhog and you're like, oh shit, like I'm actually developing this system that I can take and move over here. So, all the things I'm telling you about the new studio where I'm going to have a lounge, and, we could have done this conversation with me, you, and two other people, or brought two other photographers in, or a clothing person, and, had this conversation, or I want to go over here and do like an Ariel Hawani style interview, or I want to go over here and I got a bar that I'm creating so we can just sit there and get drunk, or I can go over here and we can work on a cooking show. I'm like, bro, like you've literally learned how to take this passion and put it into many different resources. And like to hear you talk about how much you want to grow the business to the point where you want to be in multiple states is like, that's how I think. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to come down the pipe in the next setup, but to me, I'm going to have an endless amount of space that I'm going to be living in, operating in half of a building and having a licensed kitchen, and all of my roadblocks are out of my way and I can freely create. Is like, it's a very weird feeling, because in my head, I didn't know if I'd ever get here.
It's exciting. So it's like, so little kids, I have 3 kids, right? My oldest is 14, my youngest is 8. Little kids love creating, right? Like we all love making things when we're young. And then I don't know why at some point in our lives we look at creating thing as childish, because it's not. It's like the most amazing thing in the world, creating something cool. So I see it a lot of times. I have a podcast as well, and I talk to a lot of people who go their own way, and the one thing that you can see that spark of excitement in their eyes is when they talk about creating something new, because it's like that childlike joy and excitement. Like, you know, when you have if you have a little kid, or if you can remember when you were a little kid and they make this cool thing and they run up, they're like, look, mommy, look what I made. Like, that's an incredible feeling, and we can have that as adults. Like, there's no reason you can't still have that excitement over starting a new project and seeing it come to fruition. And even if it doesn't come to fruition, who cares? Even if you start 10 projects that fail miserably, maybe the 11th is the one that works, right? Like, who cares? You just have that joy and excitement of like creating something new in your life, and it's so it's just awesome. It's like an awesome feeling.
It's wild you bring that up, because I had this moment where I think I was like talking to my brother, and when we were kids, my grandmother bought my dad a VHS camera. And back in the day, like those were like really expensive, and she bought one for all of her sons, and they were to record family vacations, and then we would play them when my grandmother was there. So I always like would do stupid shit. Like my dad would be trying to film something, and then I'd be like, oh, hey dad. And I would pretend to fall into a garbage can and like knock it over. Like it was just me for the first time, like doing shit like that. And and then like, like winter would come, and then the camera would just be sitting there, and I'd be like, hey, can we use the camera? And they're like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, we want to make home movies. 'Cause like that was a thing back in the day. And like, there was a moment that I had where like I remembered as a child, I would set up the camera and we would go and we would clean the entire basement up and we would make a talk show like setup.
Yeah.
And you know, I would tell my brother, look, I'm gonna host, and then you come on as the guest, you create the character.
You were always podcasting.
Yeah. So like, but like we had like our Halloween costumes. So like my brother was big into Halloween, and my parents were big into like us just being into stuff. So like we always had like suit coats, and it was like my dad's old stuff from the 70s that they didn't throw out. So like we would create wardrobe.
That's
and
awesome.
like we would create characters, and then like I remember my brother used to get pissed because he would like sit down, and then I would be like, oh, so like what do you do? And then I would like make up these wild stories where he'd be like, turn the camera off, that's not what you agreed to. But like when I wasn't doing that, we would make these other home movies. And then like when I was in high school, like, you know, we would go get high or be drinking, and we would go to somebody's house, and I would bring the VHS tape, because I showed it to a couple of my friends where they'd be like, yo, put Mike's home movies on. And it was all these home movies, and it was the feeling of people watched what I created and they were dying laughing.
Right?
And like that was the time when like people, like I started realizing like not everybody can make people laugh, and
right.
like not everybody was doing what I could do. And like, you know, eventually the tapes got lost, which sucks, because it's like I let this girl borrow it, and
give me her name, I'll find her. bring her to 10th Planet.
I what happened is I let her borrow it, and at the time she was going through some shit, and she got like sent away, and her mom like cleaned her fucking room out.
Right,
and
give me her mom's name.
just found the tape, and from what I'm guessing, it was thrown out. But like, I look back on those tapes and that moments, and it was so fun and so freeing, where like I was lost in this creative world that I was creating with my brother. And then I'm like, yo man, like it's so crazy. Like you do lose that, and you do grow up, and you go through these things in life. And then like when I started calling back to that, and because it was like subconsciously, like I was always like, yeah, I'll have a studio. And like, I loved talk radio when Opie and Anthony came out. And like, that was always like a thing, like, oh, they're just talking to each other. And like, you know, I loved that whole thing. And I would listen to it after work. And like, that was an escape. And then I always wanted to recreate that. And then like, I had the conversation with my brother where I'm like, yo, man, like I'm doing what I wanted to do as a child, but I couldn't ever express that I wanted to do it because real life fucks everything up in between that.
But it doesn't have to. Yeah. It doesn't have to.
So then like to see it come full circle like that, and not everybody gets to do that, or not everybody gets to, you know, and it's not like I just got to do it. This was a lot of fucking hard work building all this shit in a town, an old coal miners town that has zero resources of help. So it's completely built off of grassroots from like the listeners and the people who bought t-shirts. Like it wasn't that money is just gone because you don't know what you're doing. But like what wasn't gone was like people telling me like, you know, when every time somebody buys a t-shirt, I'm like, yeah, keep going. Every time somebody listens to a podcast, keep going. Every time I get a text from somebody like, yo, that episode was fucking awesome. Yo, that's awesome that you're doing this. Hey, I like that you do your photography in the woods, and I like this and that. And it's like these small moments that are like cool, because like I don't make money off of any of this shit.
Right.
People think I do, which is wild. But you know, I'm barely getting by. I told you I have freedom. That is what it's hard for me to make money because I don't give a fuck about it, because I'm free. So like to be able to relate back to when I was a child and to be able to do this is it's crazy. And then for you to talk about how, you know, you're doing this stuff with your daughter, and it's generationally, you're recreating what your father did for you.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. And I never thought about it. Like, that's actually so interesting because I have never thought about it like that. That's, woo, light bulb went off in my head. You know, because my father is super, super tradish. You get good grades in high school, so you can go to a good college, so you can get a good job. My father, that diligently, that was just our life. And then, you know, my father, very, very supportive of me having my own business. But my mother, my dad worked crazy hard, and my mom didn't work. She stayed home to raise us. So when I got married and had kids, I think it was easy. It was easy for my father to see me step away from a traditional role and move into something a little bit more creative, a little bit against the grain. But yeah, you're right. My dad, 100% supported me, and I couldn't do this without his support. And yeah, it's funny that you say that, because what my dad did for me, it is, yeah, sorry, that's just, you just like shot off a light bulb in my brain that I never realized. So Dad, if you're listening to this, Holly thanks you too.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
It's one of my favorite things when people come on the podcast, because it's like I thoroughly enjoy relating to people, and like this wasn't really an interview. We're just talking,
right.
Which is like, this is like, I took a break from podcasting for about 2 months. And after doing this podcast, it was much needed, because now I can have a conversation with you. But you know, you start doing them too much, you just start getting into a format. When you get into a format, you can't get things to breathe. And it's not that the other shows I did were any lesser or better, but I'm evolving and changing, and I'm opening a fucking restaurant, and it's super stressful, and there's a lot going on. And you know, as an adult and a mature person, I'm like, hey man, you gotta fucking breathe. You're gonna burn out. You gotta breathe. And then it's like, when I took that breath, and like now I'm kind of, you know, I didn't know if it was the correct time to go back into podcasting. And then after having these conversations with you, which are some of the best conversations I've had on air, it's truly the correct time to get back into it. You're one of the most creative person I've gotten to see work. JM's wedding there's so many cool things that you did that when I saw those pictures online, I'm like, that's exactly what it was like to be there.
Yes.
You're super talented. Your work ethic's impeccable. Your story was amazing. I love that you're handing this down to your daughter, and you're very open on being free and whatnot. It was a pleasure to have you on. Anytime you ever want to do anything with media creating, you ever want to, hey, I want to go over here and work on this a little bit, or hey, if you're having an event, I want to come down. Like, the door is wide open to you and your creativity. I want to give you a chance to plug everything you're doing, from how anybody can get a hold of you, how they can get your social media, how they can hire you, or anything that is all Cherryville photography.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Deanna, Cherryville Photography. That is how you can find us everywhere. Website, cherryvillephotography.com, Instagram at Cherryville Photography, Facebook at Cherryville Photography, YouTube, look us up at Cherryville Photography.
I didn't know you had a YouTube.
I do. Well, so on Apple Podcast and where you can find podcasts, our podcast is called Cherryville's Spot, and I also try to do video when I can. So I have a few different videos. A lot of them are podcast videos, so you can check out our YouTube, Cherryville Photography. And that's pretty much it. You know, I'm very easy to find. I would love you all to find me. I would love you all to hire me, because it's how I feed my family. So don't be shy. Don't be shy to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. If you're a first-time listener, first-time watcher, it's neveragainstudio.com. That's where we have everything. All the audio and video is available to watch there. The clothing is there as well. I have Kyle from Dynamite Screen Printing. He is our new screen printer, so you can also get that link to all of our clothing through my Instagram on the link tree. Spotify, all that stuff, iTunes, anywhere you can find a podcast, more than likely you can just search Never Again Studio and find it there. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe. We're building the YouTube up, so when we eventually move, there's going to be the cooking show. Studio sets will probably drop before the new year, so that's going to be our first musical thing, and then everything else is on there. And follow Instagram. That's really the only thing I fuck with. Facebook is a dumpster fire, so if you want to see anything I'm doing, it's on my personal Instagram, which is also my business one. Yeah, I kind of got through this without fucking up. Thank you so much. I hope your drive home isn't that long. I don't think you're going to definitely hit 5 o'clock traffic. I apologize.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah, that went so well. It was so refreshing to...
I believe it.
Never Again Radio. Get into it, brother.